I want to specifically look at the February 25th, 2026 vote, in which you voted in the House of Commons against motion number 44 to delete clause 191. Did you voted against that specific motion, correct?
Mr. Chair, like I said, I comply with all the obligation under the Act. And
the answer, Minister, is you did vote against that motion.
That's a problem. Francois-Philippe Champagne testified before the Ethics Committee yesterday about his conflict of interest in the Alto project. I say testified instead of answering questions because he didn't really do the latter. What he did do was create even more suspicion about his alleged ethics screen that led to a formal motion that demanded he hand his letter and his ethics screen over to committee. You can guess what happened next. Let's take a look.
In September of 2025, you wrote a letter. It was reported that you wrote a letter to the Prime Minister because you believed there was a risk of a conflict of interest. To be clear, I'm not asserting that you said there was a conflict or that one did occur, but you wrote that letter to the Prime Minister. Is that correct?
Écoutez, comme je l'ai dit d'abord, Monsieur le Président.
As I said, I want to comply with all the rules. And because of my legal background, I decided to impose a screen by an excess of caution to ensure that I am following the rules. And I wanted to ensure that we were taking all the measures possible to ensure that there was no conflict of interest, and I was ready to use the ethics screen and to not be a part of decisions regarding the project.
So right off the bat, it's interesting that Francois-Philippe Champagne has chosen French to actually speak in. Now, in committee, you can speak the language of your choice. You don't have to respond in which the language that the question was asked. You can do as you wish. But it's just interesting that Francois-Philippe Champagne is choosing to answer in French a lot of the time in this committee. And that's to avoid it's intended to avoid clips being taken from committee and used against him on social media. But at this point, I don't think we care whether it's in French or not. We're going to take what you said and let Canadians hear it.
That being said, you did go on to then participate in votes in the House related to Alto, and you did go on to introduce a bill that included measures specifically related to Alto, the implementation legislation for the High-Speed Rail Network Act, and you there's no recusal publicly posted with respect to cabinet decisions or discussions, so we're left to understand that you didn't recuse yourself there, and you've said to us today that you're operating with a keen eye to follow all of the ethical rules and guidelines and to exceed them. If that's the case, and you were of the view in September that a conflict would exist if you participated in decisions, discussions, or votes, in spite of the response from the Ethics Commissioner, why did you proceed to do the very thing that you had said that you believed, not the Ethics Commissioner, that you believed would create a conflict?
Like I said, very specifically, Mr. Chair, I did that in abundance of caution, very mindful of the law and the exception in the law, but I wanted to make sure that I did not participate in the decisions with respect to this project, but I wanted to refer to the principle of general application, which I know my colleague, Mr. Barrett, being a solicitor, and I think a barrister would know, the principle of general application contained within the Conflict of Interest Act allow me to participate in parliamentary debates and votes, including those which are related to the budget and the Budget Implementation Act. I think you even received testimony in front of this committee that this is a principle that exists not only in the federal law, but in provincial law. It's widely accepted. So not only I complied with all the rules under the Act, but I went beyond to provide to Canadians that kind of transparency that they know that not only I respected the Act and the letter of the Act, within the exception permitted under the Act, but also
Minister.
to have a filter to make sure that I was not directly involved in decisions.
So I'd like to know what it is that the precautions that you took actually prevented you from doing, because you did go on to do those things that you believe to be of a general application. But your department went on to hire one of the many Alto executives to participate in the preparation for your budget presentation and preparation of your budget speech. It's a small world, it's a small country in terms of our population comparatively, but my goodness, it leaves people questioning how it is that an Alto executive ended up helping you prepare your budget speech and your budget presentation, working for you. I couldn't imagine they could find the time even to do that while they're preparing this massive project for which these same executives are collecting massive bonuses for without having laid an inch of track.
Mr. Barrett is very, very good at politely dressing you down, so to speak. So, just to recap a little bit, so this principle of general application, we've talked about this in the Conflict of Interest Act. What this essentially means is that you can participate in discussions and in decisions and in votes as long as your potential conflict of interest are contained within a broad class, or what is also called a general application. So as long as it's not going to be directly benefiting you, or as long as what you're speaking about and making decisions about is not going to just impact what is going to be benefiting you, but it is of general interest or a broad class. So, for example, he's going to try to argue, because he brought it up, well, I wasn't making decisions just on Alto, I was making decisions on the entire budget, and that's the general application that he's talking about. Well, that's kind of a problem, just because his wife was hired for Alto, and Alto, getting these contracts, offered Alto to get a bunch of money. And executives at Alto reportedly got a bunch of bonuses for not having done anything. So the question is what did they actually do to benefit and get these bonuses? And this is where Champagne is trying to say, well, because I was voting on the rest of the budget and not just Alto, it's a general application. Yeah, but you were in discussions in cabinet and you didn't say you recused yourself from any of those. So that means that you were in discussions when Alto came up, because we've seen no recusal for anything. And that means you were discussing directly the Alto project and funding directly the Alto project, because there's really only one government agency that handles transportation, and that's Alto. So that's where all of this kind of comes to a head, and that's a problem. And then it was reported that Champagne hired an Alto exec $12,000, paid them $12,000 to write part of the speech or the whole speech for C-15. Very interesting, and that's what Mr. Barrett is bringing up right now.
Comme je disais, Monsieur le Président, j'ai respecté l'ensemble.
As I was saying, Chair, I followed all the rules. And in abundance of caution, we used the screen. And Chair, this measure is well known. It's appropriately applied by the Clerk of the Privy Council. It allows us to go beyond our legal obligation. And I did this voluntarily because I thought it was the right thing to do. Now, regarding the employee in question, Chair, again, we followed all the rules. That person had left the Crown Corporation a few months before that, and the screen was already in place regarding, the screen to avoid my direct contributions on the project was already implemented. That employee had a role in communication in French.
Question. What did the screen prevent you from doing if you were able to discuss, to vote on, if there were all of these Alto-related intersections with your responsibilities? What did this screen that you said was invoked out of an abundance of caution, what did it actually prevent you from doing?
Very quick response.
I will try, Mr. Chair, under your direction. Well, the screen, like I said, is a mechanism well established by the Privy Council for ministers and others to not participate directly in specific matters.
What did the screen prevent you from doing? And his answer is effectively, well, the screen is designed to prevent people from being in a conflict of interest. This raises questions, raises more questions. If you just answered directly, we'd get the answers and there'd be no more questions. But your non-answer creates more questions. And the main question it creates for Canadians is, what went on? And why did you feel you needed this conflict of interest screen? What was the intent of it to actually do? And what did it do? If nothing came up, you could just say, well, out of abundance of caution, I declared it could be a conflict of interest. But the great thing is it turned out that there was no conflict of interest that I actually had to be worried about because everything passed the screen. Could have said that, but he didn't. Which means Canadians have questions.
Minister, you moved, spoke on, and voted on measures to advance the Alto project through the Budget Implementation Act in various ways and means motions. Now, you spoke about matters of a general application. I want to specifically look at the February 25th, 2026 vote in which you voted in the House of Commons against motion number 44 to delete clause 191. You voted against that specific motion, correct?
Mr. Chair, like I said, I comply with all the obligation under the Act. And
the answer, Minister, is you did vote against that motion. That was very specific to delete clause 191. Now, what was in clause 191? The High-Speed Rail Network Act, to delete that from the Budget Implementation Act.
That's a problem. Boom. That's a problem. When you're voting, and you're voting against a specific amendment, and the amendment is to take out that clause of the budget, you're now not voting for the entirety of the budget. You're now not voting for the entirety of the Budget Implementation Act, which was C-15. You're voting on something very specific to take out the high-speed rail, which is Alto. We are no longer in the realm of general application. We are right squarely in the realm of very direct interest. And this is where broad class under the Conflict of Interest Act shouldn't apply.
Mr. Just to confirm, the High-Speed Rail Network Act dealt exclusively with Alto, correct?
Monsieur le Président, comme je l'ai dit, je me suis toujours conformé.
As I said, Chair, I have always followed all of the rules. My colleague understands as well 6.1 and 6.2, Section 6.1 and 6.2 of the Act on Conflicts of Interest.
Dealt specifically with the High-Speed Rail Network Act, and that act dealt exclusively with Alto. So you said that the ethics screen was in place to prevent you from making decisions, discussing, or voting on matters related to Alto, with the caveat that that did not extend to matters of a general application. Motion number 44 was not a matter of a general application. It was very specific. It was specific to advancing the Alto project, nothing more and nothing less. Isn't that right?
Monsieur le Président, encore là, comme je dis, je me suis conformé.
Chair, as I said, I followed all the rules, and my colleague, I believe, is a lawyer. I would invite him to look at the different modalities of the legislation and the jurisprudence on general application rules and conflicts of interest, and how it allows MPs to participate in votes and debates. This is a principle that is well established not only here in Ottawa, but is included in provincial legislation, and it's among best practices.
Minister, if that isn't specific, if that doesn't relate exclusively to Alto, then what could be more specific than that? Than a clause to delete advancing the project.
Monsieur le Président, comme je l'ai dit, moi, je me suis conformé à toutes les
As I said, Chair, I followed all the rules, and I would invite my colleague, I think he's a lawyer, in fact, to read the legislation and the jurisprudence regarding general application rules.
And it's not.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Je comprends la réponse.
Thank you, Minister. I understand your answer.
What good is your ethics screen if you can vote on matters that specifically and exclusively relate to advancing the Alto project? And by the way, your spokesperson, John Fragos, is quoted in an April 6, 2026 National Post article stating, quote, "The minister fully respects the screen," meaning he is neither implicated in or party to any discussions, decisions, or votes related to Alto. That is simply not true. You voted at least 13 times on matters related to Alto. You qualified that by saying that it was a matter of a general application, but then you can't explain how it is that you voted against motion number 44, which was not a matter of a general application.
Minister, I'm going to give you time to respond to that. You've got
Merci,
55
Monsieur le
seconds.
Président. Comme j'ai dit, le principe d'application générale.
The general application rule allows members of parliament to meet their obligation and allows them to vote because the people from Saint-Maurice Champlain have the right to have me vote. They elected me, but in his interpretation, given that he pays no attention to the jurisprudence, experts spoke to this, so the people from my riding have a right to all of this, and this is why I followed all the rules and all of the exceptions included in the legislation.
You know, it's amazing how flippant Francois-Philippe Champagne is, and he loves to remind everybody that he's a lawyer or a legal expert, or he has legal training, and tries to shove that in everybody's face. And he even tries to talk down to Michael Cooper, who is a lawyer, and he has a mind like you've never heard of before. He's a very, very sharp mind. And for him to say, well, you know, my colleague obviously hasn't read the jurisprudence and he hasn't read the act. Okay, well, let's just go and take a look at the Conflict of Interest Act now, shall we, Mr. Champagne? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Conflict of Interest Act. Section 6, under Conflict of Interest Rules. Decision making. So the first part says, no public officeholder shall make a decision or participate in making a decision related to the exercise of an official power, duty, or function if the public officeholder knows or reasonably should know that in the making of the decision he or she would be in a conflict of interest. Okay? Well, let's look at Section 2. Abstention from voting. No minister of the Crown, minister of state, or parliamentary secretary shall, in his or her capacity as a member of the Senate or the House of Commons, debate or vote on a question that would place him or her in a conflict of interest. Says it right there in the legislation. Conflict of interest, Section 6, subsection 2. You voted on a specific item related to your personal interest because it's in your spouse's personal interest, which is directly prohibited in the Act. There is no ambiguity on that. It's right there. So don't even start.
Could you ask the witness to give us the letter that he sent to the commissioner, including the screen?
Si nous besoin de...
If we want the letter, we need a motion from the committee, and the committee needs to support the motion. So it's not up to me to ask the minister to ask for that. That is not my responsibility as chair to ask for the production of that letter.
All right, so what's going on here? Well, I'm sure you heard Champagne repeat over and over and over and over and over, I followed the rules, I followed the rules. Well, when he was being questioned by the bloc, and there wasn't really a lot of point in showing you that because the bloc kept asking them about this letter that Champagne sent to the commissioner and the subsequent ethics screen that was created as a result of that, and kept asking him, well, can you provide this? Will you provide this? And Champagne just wouldn't answer. So this is where the bloc says, can you tell him to do this? And the chair said, well, I can't, but if the committee puts forth a motion to ask for it, sure, that's not a problem. So the bloc member is about to propose just that.
So I would then propose a motion that the committee requests that the minister make the letter public and the ethics screen that was applied. I think that it is of the public's interest. That was the motion moved by Mr. Bonnet. It's now open for debate. If there are no comments, we can move to a vote.
We're going to go to the vote. Do we have unanimous consent on the part of the committee for the minister to produce the documents that Mr. Bonnet has asked for? We don't? Okay, so let's go to a vote then. Madam Clerk, call the vote.
The vote on the motion just moved by Mr. Bonnet.
Wait.
Mr. Alto. No. Ms. Jagger.
Oh, there's commentary from the chair.
Mr.
Wow.
Chang.
No. Turn your mic off.
Monsieur Sari.
No.
Madame Lapointe.
No.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Monsieur Hardy.
My mic is on and I say yes.
Monsieur Bonnet.
Oui.
Yeas 4 pour 4, nays 5 contre 5.
Okay, so the motion for the minister to produce the documents to the committee has been defeated.
Now recall, earlier, Champagne was talking about transparency.
But I went beyond to provide to Canadians that kind of transparency that they know that not only I respected the act and the letter of the act.
Commitment to transparency, right? Well, the Liberals are so committed to transparency that they voted against ordering the minister to actually disclose the letter that he sent to the ethics commissioner and the ethics screen that he's allegedly following to be so transparent. You can't make this stuff up. This is stranger than fiction, folks. But this is what's happening. Now, to top it all off, Champagne was probably the most flippant in French with one of the conservative French-speaking members, Gabriel Hardy.
You said that your goal was to respect your obligation, so you sent a letter to recuse yourself. The definition is to remove oneself from a potential conflict of interest. So can you tell us about why you recuse yourself given that definition? If you're looking for a clip, you're not going to get it today. I've been here for 10 years. You just arrived. I'm an honorable member of this house, not you.
So you just think, listen, you wrote the letter to recuse yourself. This is what it means to recuse yourself. So what did you do? And Champagne retorts, said, if you're looking for a clip, you're not going to get it today. Do you know who I am? I'm Francois Philippe Champagne. I've been here for decades. You've just got here. Who the hell are you? That's what he's saying. Now, just so you can get the whole kind of feel of how this went down, this is how it sounded on the floor.
C'était de remplir vos obligations. Donc, vous avez écrit une lettre pour vous récuser. La définition de se récuser, c'est de se retirer d'une affaire par incompétence ou conflit d'intérêts. Pouvez-vous me dire c'est quoi le bout de la lettre? Pourquoi vous êtes récusé dans cette définition du dictionnaire-là? Qu'est-ce qui vous rejoignait?
Si vous cherchez une clip, vous ne l'aurez pas aujourd'hui. Là. Moi, ça fait 10 heures que je siège au Mont Parlement. Vous venez d'arriver ici. Moi, je suis un membre honorable de cette chambre-là, comme vous.
So that's how it went down. Jeez, the smugness on him is just unreal. But this is Francois Philippe Champagne. He tries to be more grandiose than he actually deserves. And he tries to elevate his own stature by talking down to other people. It is rather disgusting, especially how he talks down to women, folks. And this is documented. And it's just gross. The alleged party of the feminists are the ones that seem to have the biggest problem with women. But nobody wants to really talk about that in the media now, do they? No, they don't. But this is Francois Philippe Champagne. And this testimony raises a lot of questions about what his conflict of interest really means. Why he participated in votes. He wasn't allowed to. He tries to insist he followed all the rules. That was his favorite answer today. And we've proven by the government's own legislation that he did not. And Michael Cooper called this out. Michael Barrett called this out. Gabriel Hardy called it out. The Bloc called it out. Now, at least we can be grateful that this wasn't hidden in camera. I guess that's our win for this week. If you can call that a win. But ladies and gentlemen, this is what the Canadian public needs to see. The Liberals are so committed to transparency that they're willing to obfuscate and pull the curtain over people's eyes whenever they have the opportunity. All in the name of a high-speed train that will never make any money and nobody will ever use.